think, you know, I could speak from that both as a creator and as someone that consumes a lot of comics as well. I love this idea of storytelling kind of almost being like a guide or a comfort when we're going through challenges, for example, or just as something that helps us process or understand the world or our lives or our identities, our place in the world, that kind of thing. And I think comics are a fantastic medium for personal development, personal growth. And I can think back throughout my life and certain comics that I've read that have really influenced or helped me to kind of come to terms with what I was experiencing. Just as an example, stepping forwards into adulthood, a few years ago I sadly lost a baby, and I came across Nicola Streeton's You, Me and Billy, is it? Her book really influenced me and helped me to deal with something that was difficult at the time, but it's again that use of medium of storytelling to just share your experience and allow others to connect to that experience through the medium. And that's so powerful, and it's in some ways it's so simple. It's not about trying to change or fix the people or the world around us necessarily. It's about simply sharing our stories, and it's through sharing those stories that we connect to each other, we connect to the world, we connect to our experience, we recognize that we're not alone in what we're experiencing. So yes, I think comics are such an amazing medium for personal growth and change. And again, more recently I've been working on more of an autobiographical memoir type comic, and I found that such an amazing process. Even if no one saw it, that process of putting your life experience down in comic format is such an amazing thing to do. It's sometimes challenging and messy because we've got to go there again and experience it and feel it and communicate it, but it's such an amazing process of self-development. I think for me it's such a gift as an artist to be able to explore these challenges through the media. I love that because it shows that people are wanting to engage more with that kind of way of understanding the world is through graphic novels.
I almost feel like this is easier to talk about from the other perspective, right? Is for me, seeing, for example, like art of transmasculine people where they look really like beautiful, or like it's obviously that someone has taken a lot of care and love and put that into the drawing, even about things that in society are not necessarily perceived as like desirable or even like acceptable traits or like ways for bodies to look and stuff. I feel like maybe similarly about people using wheelchairs and mobility aids and stuff like that, seeing art that is not just positive but like obviously like loving and coming from a place of really like understanding from artists who really understand that experience themselves means a lot to me. I think that especially because how often do you see that in mainstream culture? Like it's not something I see on TV. It's definitely something I see in like indie art and indie comics. It makes me understand how much I miss the absence of it in TV shows or films or whatever, like seeing nuanced comics, and I guess it's also in some books I've read as well about like trans experience feels like a big deal to me. It's difficult to like explain how much it means. It's a new experience to like see people in media that I'm like, that's me, when I like read so many books as a kid and I like never ever saw that beginning to see a little bit of that, even if it's like only just reaching some bits of mainstream publishing or mainstream TV, is like a big deal to me.
I mean, for me, coming from Black culture, it's different. Your dad and mom wants you to be a doctor, a lawyer, and working an accountant. When I said I was going to create a comic book, I think most of my family looked at me like, okay, but there's things I really wanted to do, and I felt like I was not doing them. As a filmmaker, there's things I want to do through films as well, but I can't achieve them because I need access to resources to do that. But I can express myself through these comic books. And coming from the culture where I come from, when you create a comic book, they're like, dude, like black people don't create comic books, especially you're in Scotland or you're from Congo, everybody looks at you strange. It was kind of a challenge for me, but that's the thing. I always want to keep myself as that child in Congo that used to go through a broken TV box. Those TV boxes in the 80s, I used to get my brothers and sisters to lie the other side. And because the inside part was not there, I would put my head through and act out all these Spider-Man and things that I've seen on TV. And I always wanted to express myself, and I cannot stop. I can't be a happy person if I'm not expressing myself through this medium. And I really love it. And I see myself, I feel like a child again. And I feel like I have hope for the future because I'm explaining to myself and I'm inspiring other people to do this and change the world for a better.
Yeah, but not in a way that I'm like, I don't think it's like I'm gonna start advocating like, hey, you depressed, do a comic. Oh, hey, you got something going on, do a comic. It's nothing that I choose to address. I know people have put a lot of work into proving how comics work as an educational tool, and it kind of sometimes feels a little bit like we're trying to still prove ourselves at a table. It's like, oh, well, we're educational and we're so good at teaching people educational things, and that's why we should be allowed to play in the big sand. And okay, that's amazing. I'm so happy that comics are educational and they work so great and that this is a thing. But also, I don't want to do educational comics. I don't want to do that. I want to do comics about butts. I want to do comics that have so little worth but make me happy. But also I want to do comics that are full of worth but aren't education. Like I do not want someone to be like, yo, you really taught me something about rape. Leave me out of it. And some people, that is what they want to do. That's something, some people, that's what they are passionate about. That's what they want to do. For me personally, I just want to have a good time. And I just want to have a good time, do comics that I like, that make me laugh, that are a little bit silly, and that there are angsty. It's because this world, you make me like this. So sometimes I have to process other things. But in an ideal world, I'd just be doing silly comics about butts. I'd be having a great time. I've always just wanted to tell stories. And that's not to be like, comics should just be silly, because they're not. But for me personally, in a free world where everyone's allowed to do whatever they want to do, I don't want to teach anybody anything in a comic, because that's not what I'm here for. One of my favorite comics artists ever, Miron Chua, that is not educational stuff. That is just, here's the silliest lesbian romantic comedy you've ever read in your life, and it's amazing. And that's what I want. Like, there's not enough queer Black joy in the world. And if it's any sort of political educational thing I would be drawn towards, it'd be sort of making more of that. And that is going to be political, and it says that people don't think that Black queer people should be happy and should be able to, you know, be in a comic, living their dang lives and minding their own business. And that's what I want to have more of. And that's what I'm contributing towards. I don't want to educate people. I'd rather be making my comics in a room where everyone's on the same level and is understanding and engaging with it the same, rather than sort of saying, here's a comic about some Black queer people to teach you that Black queer people are people. Like, that's not what I want to do.
Personally speaking, I definitely felt like more comfortable and proud of myself like after writing queer characters. It was weird. It just felt like it was secret or something. Like I wasn't very like out as a kid, and then writing these characters that are just existing, and it felt very good for me. I found it very healing, and it was also great. And I haven't talked about this much, I'm not very open about, because it's very new to me, but I'm like non-binary, and writing Charlie in Kim Reaper Vampire Island was just like a really nice way for me to personally explore that identity. Yeah, I personally get a lot out of it. I feel like I haven't really talked about it that much, but then like when I'm writing it, it's like it just comes so naturally kind of thing.
Well, I definitely think comics are very good at sort of fostering growth, because so many comics, they're kind of like a passive way of recognizing yourself in those situations, or recognizing or empathizing with a character that is probably going through some similar thoughts or feelings that you are going through. That's the whole point of comics, in my opinion. I think comics are always about finding that connection with a reader, where the reader can sort of see themselves a little bit. I mean, books do that, TV does that, you know, comics and comics do that. But comics are that lovely combination of, you're not going to be in a huge rush, because, you know, it's like when you're watching TV or a film or whatever, you know, you got to watch it. Comics you can open, put down whenever, come back to it whenever, reread it again. And, you know, you might read it, skim through it first time, and then you might read it really, really in very high detail afterwards to pick out all the tiny little things afterwards. You know, so you can experience a comic in slightly different ways depending on the way you read it and how fast you read it initially. So for me, they're a really passive, gentle way of you recognizing that or taking on that information compared to other sort of mediums. Comics, as a way of speaking to a reader, helps their growth a lot more. Of course, you know, comics can be very, very challenging to a reader as well. They can challenge your beliefs, they can challenge sort of like your presumptions and so on, but they do it in a gentle way. I find that, you know, films can be very confrontational about it compared to like reading it in a comic. But also sometimes I find even that books can be very confrontational, because they're trying to foster growth or foster a change of thought. They can be almost a bit too didactic, whereas, you know, comics, you can sort of like show something gently with some pictures. You don't even have to have words, but you can see from the situation, oh man, that's actually quite bad, isn't it? You know, and you get that feeling. You feel an atmosphere, you feel a feeling, an emotion from it without things necessarily having to be said. Obviously, you know, all sorts of mediums can do it in a gentle way as well, but I think comics do it best.
Yes, I have. I've definitely seen comics be a really great medium for personal growth and identity. As I said before, like when I was thinking about myself growing up, it gave me a sense of seeing myself and my own identity and how I wanted to hold myself. But I've also seen it with other people of sort of thinking about comics as like, oh, this is for me, but also thinking of the wider sense of who gets to see themselves as a reader. That is very, very integral to what I do. So the work I do at Book Week Scotland, my official job title is Reading Communities Manager, because I want to foster and support communities of readers. I want everybody in Scotland to benefit from the life-changing magic of books. And when I read that on the website of Scottish Book Trust, I went, yeah, I really want to work here. This sounds great. And they've done lots of research into the fact that reading for pleasure is one of the highest indicators that a child will break the poverty cycle. So actually reading and being involved in reading and enjoying reading is something that will benefit people, and I fully believe that reading benefits people. So I'm really interested in the sense that if you read comics and you think you're not a reader, you are a reader, and that sort of literary elitism actually could be limiting people in ways that I think is terrible. So I think actually having it, no, I'm a comics reader and that makes me a reader, is really, really interesting as well. And it took me a while to get there. And I think comics, like, I'm a total idealist about comics. I think they can do anything. And I think that you can find yourself in comics, but you can also build yourself in comics. You know, you can figure out things about yourself, but also it can lead to a better life. It can lead to better opportunities. It definitely did for me.
I think it's really interesting when you sort of get into the kind of auto-buy strand and graphic medicine. You know, I've got a lot of friends that are in that, like Saba Khan, Zara Slattery. So both of them have had books out recently with Myriad. Zara's is Coma and Saba's is Roles We Play. I love that side of it. I'm really kind of intrigued by that. And like Rachel House, huge fan of, and you know, forever looking at kind of the politics of gender and sexuality and just the way that we think. I love Rachel's work, just something that kind of makes you think, but also there's something ultimately very uplifting about her worldview that I think is what more people need. Yeah, and then on a personal level, like doing Barking for me was sort of a way as a creator, I think, when you do that kind of work as well. So Barking was based on a mental health crisis I had in my 20s after my dad died suddenly. And I think, although it was quite a difficult experience to make it, it really kind of put to rest a load of demons that I'd carried with me for a long time. Great way of kind of, better than for, I think I did therapy, and I don't think it worked anywhere near as well as actually making the book. And then the conversations I have with people after that, the people who read it and then they'll come and talk to me about their experiences. There's so much work now that's doing that. I mean, Myriad is a great publisher to look at for that kind of genre of work. But equally, zines, I think, are amazing for that. There's a brilliant zine maker called Wall Glitter who's on Instagram and is based out in the States and does these just extraordinary little zines. They're just so heartfelt, kind of little, almost like diary entries. I love that kind of moment where you get to see into someone else's kind of being and the way they tick. I think because comics are such an intimate way to read, that it really feels like you can know someone by reading their stuff. I love that. I love that when you can read someone's work and you feel like you've just stepped into their story or their minds. It fosters so much empathy in that regard, you know, and I think in a way that so many other mediums don't quite achieve. You've got that combination of text and an image and a beautifully kind of sophisticated language that is, but also you still have to work at it to make it. You have to bring yourself to it. I think all of that is growth. I think empathy is the greatest tool for growth that there is. Trying to understand what someone else has been through can only benefit you understanding yourself in the long run.
Yes and no. So sometimes it feels like for every one step forward you take, not even two, but 3 or 4 steps are taken backwards. And I think this has to do, and I know we'll get onto this, I think this has to do a lot with fandom and the fan culture. But if I'm going to speak optimistically, there are a number of comics in recent years which I think have really made a difference in terms of fostering personal growth, not just for me, but you know, people around me as well. One of them is Meg John Barker's Gender, a graphic guide. Obviously, I mean, everybody should be reading that. That should be on book lists for schools. We sent copies to nieces and nephews because we thought it was really important that everybody read this. Another for me, surprisingly, is Sean Tan's The Arrival. So it's a little longer than a few years ago. But for me, I think it really opened my eyes to the experience of immigration, of immigrants coming into countries where they're isolated, where there's language barriers, where there's, you know, themes of loneliness and also themes of assimilation. So I think that comics can be an effective medium for fostering personal growth and identity, but there are also a lot of issues around gatekeeping, which I'm sure we'll get to as well, that means sometimes that doesn't happen.